is up, Pitt fans? Thank you so much for tuning in to Inside the Panthers on YouTube. My name is Steven Thompson, coming at you with another Inside Pitt Practice report after day 4 of spring ball. That's right, we are right back into the thick of spring ball after the Panthers took a week off for spring break. The Panthers all went home, got some rest and recovery, and then came back for to finish off these last few weeks of spring ball after 1 week really of getting into the thick of it, of getting into practices, and really only one padded practice. Panthers were back in pads today. Had a couple lively practices, according to head coach Pat Narduzzi. Seemed to be in good shape, after that week off. He said you're always concerned about how these guys come back, but he was pretty pleased with how they did return and how they kept up their conditioning during the off week. Before we get into some of the nuts and bolts of what I saw at practice today and what we heard from not just Narduzzi, but a couple of important players as well, we do have to start with some bad news. Nate Temple, super senior defensive end, suffered a lower leg injury, according to head coach Pat Narduzzi. He is out for the season. That's not just spring ball. That is not just fall camp. That is all of the 2024 season. Really unfortunate news for a guy who was ready to use his last year of eligibility. If you remember, Temple started 8 games for the Panthers last year, put up some decent numbers, 26 tackles, 4.5 for a loss, 1.5 sacks. He looked like he was, primed for a big year in 2024. Instead, his career will be cut a little shorter. He will have to at least take one more year off. It's a blow to the Panthers' defensive line depth. It's a blow to Temple. He should, in theory, if he gets a medical red shirt, be able to come back next year and stick around for one more season in blue and gold if he so chooses. If you remember, Temple went to the transfer portal this offseason, was able to return, and as Pat Narduzzi talked about a little bit later, that's not super common, but Temple, a good leader, a guy who's played a lot of football for the Panthers and a guy that they trust. They were able to make an exception for him and kind of bring him back into the fold. So, not positive news. You wish all the best to Nate as he recovers and tries to get back on track and finish off his college football career on a more positive note. The other thing I want to talk about is Pat Narduzzi, during his press conference today, ripped off a ton of shout outs, guys that have been really impressing him throughout these first few weeks of practice. I mean, there's some familiar names on there. We've talked a little bit about guys like Kyle Lewis, Rasheem Biles, Dayon Hayes, uh, Donovan McMillan, Javon McIntyre, PJ O'Brien, Cruz Brookins, Rylan Gandy, Kanata Mumfield, Jules Goff, Nate Yarnell. Those are some familiar names that Pat Narduzzi said has been doing really well, that had especially good days during their fourth practice of the spring, which was yesterday. Yesterday, by the time you all are seeing this video, but there are a couple notable names as well. I mean, Lewis and Biles, it's guys we know, but I think some of those. This is the first time that we've really heard from Narduzzi about him. I really think that linebacker room is deep. We'll talk a little bit more about them in a second, but those are guys who are, I think, good athletes, and I think they make up a deep room. And it's really the first time we're hearing about them this spring. I think the same goes for guys like Jesse Anderson, a safety who's helping make up that deep safety room behind uh, guys like McMillan, McIntyre, O'Brien, even Brookins, who, like I said, we've talked about before. Um, Tamarian Crumpley is a name at corner. That's a guy that the Panthers really like, and as they look for a second starting corner opposite Rylan Gandy, who they have already pegged as a starter, that's a name to watch as well. Montgomery and Isaiah Montgomery, excuse me, Terrence Enos. Enos is more of a guard, but Montgomery a tackle. Those are guys who might fit in as that sixth or seventh guy, those swing guys that, as we saw last season, are super super important to the offensive line depth. And if they go through anything like they did last year, you might see more of Terrence Enos and Isaiah Montgomery sliding in behind that first group of offensive linemen. I'll finish off with a shout out to, talking about Nate Yarnell a little bit. Narduzzi has been really praising Yarnell's work, says he's a great leader, really getting the offense down. He praised the offense today for just how they're figuring things out, how they're putting the pieces into place, getting guys loose and making a lot of plays and putting guys in space. Seems like this offense is doing what it's been expected to do, at least so far. There are a few growing pains, but led by Yarnell, who Narduzzi said at his best day of the spring on Tuesday, really seems to be coming into his own and accepting that QB1 role, that leadership role, and helping this offense plug along and learn a new system. Moving on a little bit to get a little bit more specific, I want to talk about the offensive line. I spent a bunch of time watching them today during the closing minutes of the portion of practice open to the media today. There's definitely a clear kind of first line of guys, and it's not particularly surprising because there's so many of these guys coming back. You go left to right. It's Ryan Baer at that tackle spot. Looks like it's BJ Williams in that first left guard spot. Terrence Moore is that center. And then on the right side, you got Jason Collier Jr. right now working at the guard spot, and Branson Taylor at right tackle. I mean, most of those names not very surprising. Jason Collier is maybe the only one that you could be a little surprised about, and only because he had some of his fair share of struggles. Collier's an older guy, a redshirt senior, who's I think is also using his COVID year this year as well. He's been around the Panthers a lot. Played his most meaningful football last year when he got kind of I would say thrust into starting duties kind of abruptly with all those injuries that you know about from last year. It was a real meat grinder up front. I think that might change pretty soon. We heard from Pat Narduzzi earlier during spring ball that Ryan Jacoby is still recovering from that knee injury he suffered last year during fall camp. We haven't gotten an update on him, haven't seen much of him, and so we might not know whether or not he's in the mix for that guard spot. You have to assume he's a talented guy. He's a guy that they like, and it seemed like in fall camp last year that he was fixing to really push for that starting guard spot if he was not the favorite. I think this offensive line is far from a finished product. We don't know when Jacoby's going to kind of be back into the fold, but you have to assume that right now it's not a super complete unit right now. On top of that, I mean, you got a guy like Caleb Holmes coming in. He's not a mid-year enrollee, but he's a freshman, expected to be a freshman in the fall, a four-star recruit, the Panthers' highest rated in the 2024 class. He's a guy that some national writers, some guys at 24/7 Sports and others figure could be an instant impact recruit, a guy that could play right away. He went to the same high school as BJ Williams, so it seems like they're just kind of churning out guys there. But he seems like a really talented guy with great size, able to play that could play right away. So I wouldn't count out Caleb Holmes as well. He is an interior lineman too, which I think is notable because those tackle spots seem really set. Moore, I think, is really set at center. I don't think anyone's going to be able to push him for that spot, but Williams and Collier, guys who were kind of up and down last year, they could be, open spots. They could be spots where guys could step in and maybe compete for some jobs. So don't be shocked if in a couple months we're sitting around during the summer, during August, during summer camp and talking about Caleb Holmes as a guy who's pushing for some playing time right away. Moving to the other side of the ball, there are a lot of holes to fill on defense. We've talked about the corners a little bit. Rylan Gandy seems to be a pretty set starter there. They're still looking for one more guy. But I think there are a bunch of questions about linebacker and defensive line, arguably more than really anywhere else on the team. I think offense, there are questions about the scheme and everything, but the personnel seem pretty set, at least who your starting 11 is going to be, your top 11 is going to be. Defense is a little more unsure, not just at corner, but at linebacker. I mean, you've got two guys who seem like they're cemented as starters. I would say Solomon DeShields is definitely a starter after a breakout season last year, which he started every game except for one where he got knocked out on a kickoff. That was the Wake Forest game. Jordan Bass comes in to replace him. But I think Brandon George is also making a push for that Mike linebacker spot. He seems to be the favorite right now. That's what Pat Narduzzi told us, that he is kind of the favorite right there, that he's the guy who's really standing out and leading there. But, Narduzzi also told us that in addition to, maybe a spot at outside linebacker, he really likes Kyle Lewis there. Lewis started a game or two and played a bunch at that outside linebacker spot last year. But you've also got guys like Braylon Lovelace, who's Narduzzi said has made some really great progress coming along from last spring and has really grown. He played a lot last year as well. You also think about Rasheem Biles and Jordan Bass, two really talented recruits from the 2023 class. This is a really deep linebacker group that we've talked about before, and I have a lot of confidence that not only are they, deep, do they have some young talent, but they can be really good right away. I think, you thought about last year, and it was thin ranks. At least it looked like going into fall camp, going into the season. But they've really found some dudes. They found some young dudes as well, and I think not only is the immediate future really bright for that group, but I think the long term future of that group is really bright as well. Defensive tackle is a little bit of a different story. It's not that I'm not necessarily confident that they have talent there, guys who can play. I just think there are a few more question marks. We're not exactly sure who's going to be the guy. Defensive end is one thing. You got Dayon Hayes, who I think everyone is really high on and expecting big things from him this year. I think Nate Matlick could come in and be a real standout guy right away. Jimmy Scott has shown some flashes as well. I'm going to forget some guys, but there are a couple other talented defensive ends. Oh, David Ojiegbe, the transfer from Clemson. I'm really excited about him too to see what he's got going on. But defensive tackle, there's some big question marks there. You lose three super senior guys. You lose DeAndre Jules, who was arguably their best defensive tackle last season, a guy that they expected to really grow into a star this year before he transferred to South Carolina. Now you're left with some unproven guys. Some guys make one guy at least making a position change, another guy is a transfer. I asked Pat Narduzzi about it today, and he pointed out Sean Fitzsimmons, I believe a redshirt sophomore going into this year, might still be still a redshirt freshman this year, but will be going into his redshirt sophomore year in fall camp. I think a really talented guy, a guy who was hampered by some injuries last year. I'm excited about to see what he can do in a full year that's healthy. But again, haven't seen a whole lot of him. What we have seen is good. We have seen some flashes, but you know it's tough to be consistently good at that defensive tackle spot, and you got to really see it from a guy like Fitzsimmons as well. Nakai Johnson is making a position switch a bit from defensive end to defensive tackle. It was interesting what Pat Narduzzi said. He was asked what was kind of behind the position switch for Johnson, and he said Johnson is really twitchy, and you got to do a little bit more thinking as a defensive end. He was a defensive end for the first, I believe, 2 years, 3 years of his career at Pitt, and they want him to speed up a little bit, and to do that, they're helping him by moving into a position where you do less thinking and you just rely on your explosiveness, your athletic ability. They love his athletic ability and they want him to kind of maximize that. They don't want him to have to think as much, so they're putting him in a spot where he can really utilize that athletic ability and he can really make plays just as a standout athlete. And so we'll see how that turns out for him. I'm also really intrigued by Nick James. That was the last guy that Narduzzi pointed out, a transfer from Indiana, former four-star recruit, one of those really impressive defensive linemen that Charlie Partridge recruited before he exited for a job with the Indianapolis Colts. You just wonder how the talent translates. Guys who were four-star recruits at one place don't always work out when they transfer. Sometimes they're transferring for a reason. But I think it's encouraging to hear that James has been doing good things in spring ball, and that maybe he can live up to those lofty ratings that he had coming out of high school, and just need a fresh start somewhere else. So I think there are options. They are just options with some question marks, and I think there's tons of talent there. It's just, does the talent translate on the field? I think last year Pitt relied a lot on experience. Like I mentioned, those three super senior defensive tackles. Fitzsimmons, I think's really talented, wasn't there as much as you would have liked. Pitt relied on experience there. This year, they're going to be relying more on talent. It's just kind of a different dynamic going on, but I'm excited to see what these guys looks like when they're actually able to hit people, when they're actually able to go 11 on 11, and we get to see it as well. So I think a lot of potential there, and really a position to watch, especially because of how important being able to control the middle of the field and control the run game and control the line of scrimmage is to this defense. And I want to finish on a bit of a sentimental note, but we saw a lot of old vets, some graduated guys coming back to Pittsburgh this week. I mean, you see guys like Jake Cradle and David Green, guys who are from the Pittsburgh area, excuse me, but are preparing for the next level, preparing for the NFL draft and their pro day. We see them around the facility all the time, training, getting their bodies right for some of these drills that they're going to run. But we also saw guys like Shane Simon coming back today at practice, and he didn't just walk into the facility, walk through to go do his lift, but he was sticking around. He was watching the linebackers really intently. He's talking to the trainers. He's giving everyone hugs and high fives. saying hello to position coach Ryan Manolik as well. Um, not only is this a sentimental moment for these guys, kind of their one of their last runs through the facility, one of their last trips, through here with their college team. It's kind of their last act as a college player, but um, it's a signal that they're kind of moving on. I forgot to mention running back Sibo Flemister was there as well. Um, and it's just a reminder that as you see guys like Servassier Dennis and Aaron Donald, just that there's a connection there. I think it's positive to see these alumni that are staying connected to the Panthers. But it also got me thinking about where this kind of what this class of draftable Pitt players looks like. We know last year there were a ton of guys getting drafted. It was kind of the end of one era of Pitt football, I would say, an era that was marked by the ACC championship win in 2021, and then another 9-win season and a ranked finish in 2022. Um, Last year, a lot of those guys aged out and went to the draft, and Pitt had a lot of success in that draft. This year, a little different. These are a lot of the guys who made up the 3-9 season from last year. Some of them holdovers from that 9-win season as well, but just a different group. And I think, it might not be 6 guys getting drafted like it was last year, which is a really impressive number, especially for a school like Pitt and really kind of any school outside of the Georgias and the Alabamas and the like. But I think there are some really intriguing prospects in here. You think, obviously at the top of the list, MJ Devonshire and Matt Concalves, 2 guys who were invited to the combine and seem to be moving up draft boards pretty quickly. We're kind of the headliners of this class of Pitt guys. But, Bub Means, another guy who got invited to the combine, but I think was going a little underrated, has really made a great name for himself at, the East West Shrine Bowl, and then also at the combine as well. Seems like he's generating some buzz as maybe a sleeper. He's become a darling for some of these draft analysts around the country. But I'm also interested to see how guys like Shane Simon test out. AJ Woods. AJ Woods is a guy who's been gaining some draft buzz as well. There are reports that at least 5 NFL squads are interested in adding him. I don't know if he'll get drafted, but there is certainly some NFL interest that I think should help him a lot. I think Sibo Flemister has an NFL ready body, and he's got some speed, and he's got pass catching ability. I think he's interesting as a running back as well. Malcolm Epps, obviously that frame that's I believe it's 6'5" and got great long arms. I think he's really interesting as a tight end as well. And Marquez Williams, I'm not counting him out just yet. I mean, people are obviously going to bring up the size, but I think you turn on the film and you see a guy who plays well beyond his size. He's a good tackler. He forces turnovers. Guys don't throw at him that much. He does not get picked on, quite honestly, for a guy who is that small. I think there's a lot of potential in this class of, draftable Pitt guys, and I'm excited to see how these guys test out. I'm excited to see not just the results of their testing, because obviously those pro day things, those are really what it's all about. It's about getting some numbers down. It's about showing your athletic ability, but I'm just interested to see kind of what comes from it. What do these scouts think of it? What are the results or the reports that we get from pro day? Because I think there's some underrated guys in this Pitt class, and there are going to be some gems that eventually make it to the next level and make it to the NFL as well. But with that, I'm headed out of here. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another Inside Pitt Practice Report. Day 4 of Pitt Spring Ball is in the books. We will be back on Thursday for another Inside Pitt Practice Report. I'll be there at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex to cover that practice, and again on Friday to close out the week. So stay tuned for a lot of great reporting and content coming from Pitt Spring Ball. Appreciate you all tuning in. Like I said, make sure to like this video, subscribe to us on YouTube. That's youtube.com/@InsideThePanthers, and follow all of our reporting at InsideThePanthers.com. Like I said, appreciate you all tuning in, and I'll see you next time.